Good morning, everyone. Hello. My name is Tia Brown, and welcome to CDCs in the Face of Gentrification as a part of the Ohio CDC Association Annual Conference. I'm just going to do a quick overview of our agenda for the session today, and after that, I'll do some quick housekeeping items, and we'll get started, okay? I see a lot of people have their cameras turned off, and that's completely fine. If you want to continue to do that during the intro, and then also as we get into the presentation, that's totally fine. But then you are going to be doing some jumping around a little bit into separate groups. So if you feel free to go ahead and share your camera at those times, please do so, because it's about connecting and networking. So just so everyone knows what we're going to expect, the first thing we're going to do after these housekeeping items are going to break into icebreaker groups. So there will be a list of fun questions that you can take time to answer, get to know each other a little bit. And then after the icebreaker session, you'll come back together for the presentation that I've prepared for you all. And after the presentation, we'll have a quick break. The presentation won't be long, don't worry. They're keeping me to about 15 minutes, and then after that, we'll have a quick 2-minute break for people to stretch, do whatever they have to do. We'll come back together, and there'll be another time for breakout sessions where there will be a list of questions on the topic of the session today that you all can discuss. We'll come back together, and someone from your group will be able to share some of the ideas and things that were talked about in your breakout session, and then we'll close. So we're hoping everything goes smoothly with technology. If you have any issues, please comment in the chat. We have our questions attendee there if you need to reach out to them directly if you have questions, if you're having any kind of issue with getting to the Dropbox where we have the list of icebreaker questions, and then also the gentrification type list of questions. Let the questions participant know if you have any issues there. And then this session is being recorded. You will have access to it later. The Dropbox links, which should be in the chat session for all the chat area for all the resources we're going to talk about today. Again, I stated this earlier. If you want to turn off your camera, you can. But then whenever you go to your breakout sessions for your icebreaker and then your chat later, please turn your camera on so people can interact with you. But then again, if you don't want to, hey, keep it off. It's your prerogative. Feel free to switch your settings, and then if you want to go between the speaker view or the grid view so you can see everyone, or just hone in there on the speaker at the time. If anybody has closed captioning issues, if you go to the upper left-hand corner of the screen, there's an option there for closed captioning. Please, everyone, if you aren't already, please mute yourself. And I do believe that our tech support is keeping an eye on everyone remaining muted. The chat is being monitored by our questions participants. So anytime you have a question, please type it into the chat area. And if I forget to look, she'll let us know that there's a question lingering. And then be sure to visit the exhibitor space to check out some of the conference sponsors. The link will be in the chat. And thank you to all the sponsors of the conference. So right now it's time for icebreakers. The tech crew is going to move everyone into a separate group. It'll only be for about 4 or 5 minutes for people to take some time to introduce themselves and answer maybe 1 or 2 of the fun icebreaker questions that they've prepared. So I'll see you guys back here for the presentation in about 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. So I guess we're all back from the breakout rooms, correct? Some head nods? Okay, I appreciate that. So I'm just going to give a quick intro. My name is Tia Brown. I work in the West End of Cincinnati at Seven Hills Neighborhood Houses, which is the CDC of the West End. By no means do I consider myself any kind of expert, but I am a CDC employee working hard, and we're trying to do our best to combat displacement and gentrification in our neighborhood as it faces major developments. And I too am here, like you all, to connect and to learn. So if you got suggestions, if you got ideas, if you got experience, please share, reach out. I'm excited to learn as much as you are. And I'm just here to share a little bit about our experience, what we're going through down here in the West End of Cincinnati. I am ready for my slides. Tech team, if you could share, thank you so much. So we can go on to the next one, a little bit of our role in the West End. So historically, Seven Hills Neighborhood Houses was a social service agency. So we've been in the community for decades, serving, being there for the community as advocates in so many ways. But more recently here in 2016, we became the CDC of the West End after we became a LISC Place Matters lead agency. We helped a lot with the West End Speak community plan to help keep the residents focused on the goals that they had put in place for themselves. As we move forward and into the future, you know, the community came together and said, this is what we want. And we've been there to try to help assist the community. So we do a number of things at our organization, in addition to being the CDC. So on the screen there, you see a few of them, and it's a really rewarding place to work, to be able to be there to support the community in so many ways. You can scroll on down. Also, in addition to the list that you saw above, we also have the Community Land Co-op under our umbrella. So that was created back in the 80s. It was a place where people who were leaving the West End, they were able to donate their house to the Community Land Co-op, and it made affordable homeownership opportunities for other people. Now, sometime in the 90s, the co-op had an inventory of houses into the 30-some houses that that were, you know, essentially donated. And through the years, the organization, of course, met hard times. They had to sell off some houses. Luckily, a lot of houses were purchased by people and paid off. So that's been a celebration over the years. But in 2017, they approached Seven Hills and asked for us to, you know, absorb the organization, but just because they had hit another tough patch, and they didn't want to close their doors. They still wanted to serve. So right now we do have the Community Land Cooperative under our umbrella. We hold the mortgages to 5 homes, and we own and manage 2 duplexes. Next slide, a little bit about the West End. So a lot through the years, development has happened to the West End so many times rather than with the West End. So these are a couple of images of the West End back in the 30s. It just shows how densely populated the community was and how it doesn't look anything like that now. It's about a third of the size that it used to be. Next slide, please. Just a quick timeline. Let me get my paper out here. I don't want to act like I can see the little writing there. So yeah, so many individuals were displaced from the West End back when Lincoln Court Laurel Homes was built in the 30s. That was a historic housing development that was created in the 50s. Thousands of families were displaced because of urban renewal. I-75 was built, Queensgate was created, which is basically a manufacturing type of neighborhood where no one lived, and it took a huge portion of the West End. So tons and tons of houses, factories, buildings, churches were torn down in the 50s in the name of urban renewal. And luckily and unluckily, we have a very large stock of images that is housed at our Union Terminal, our museum center down here in Cincinnati. They took a picture of every building that they tore down, and it is, you know, it's nice to have the images, but at the same time, it's a heartbreaking thing to look at because there are so many beautiful buildings that were tore down, but then you think about all of the people that were in those buildings in their homes and how many people were displaced. It's just a lot. And then we skip on to the 90s, you know, Lincoln Court Laurel Homes were torn down, and then a City West development was created where a lot of people were promised that there would be homes built for them that they could come back to, but there wasn't. Basically the money ran out and the opportunity just wasn't there with that Hope 6 project. In the 2000s, a lot of community residents stood up against a major development of an organization called CityLink. And the community was trying to be built, but after the pushback from the community, CityLink kind of changed their model, and it's now there and standing and operating, and it's a wonderful addition to the community. So that's at least a development where an idea came to the community, people heard the residents, and switched it up to try to make it better. And then more recently, in 2018, the stadium for FC Cincinnati was announced that it would be put in the West End, and there are definitely some hardships that we are facing and have faced with that as we look into the future with our new neighbors. We can go to the next slide. History of disinvestment. So the West End was one of those neighborhoods where African Americans had to live. There wasn't a lot of options for African Americans back then. So this was a neighborhood where African Americans had to live. There was a redlining going on, and the city planners deemed the West End as a blighted area. And but when you look at some of those images from the exhibit down at our Union Terminal, it's just hard to believe that. Sometimes it's almost like you can look back at some of the news clippings and see how they were trying to portray it as a slum and dilapidated, but it just wasn't the case, but it helped to prove their point so they could push their agenda. So over 60,000 people were displaced, and the neighborhood at one time was 80% home ownership, and now it's 80% rental. So it just goes to show you just over the years how much development has happened to the West End rather than with the West End. Next slide, please. Just to quickly go over some of the community work that our CDC does here more recently in the last year or so. We do put together a neighborhood newsletter to share some positive stories, because if we're all from CDCs, we know how the news will show up for negative stories, but it's hard to get them to come around for some good news. So we love doing our newsletter. We have worked hard to reactivate our business alliance. We're always doing community advocacy on all kinds of levels, and especially around development and making sure people are communicating with the city, handling citations. We are going to court with people and hearings and different things like that, just to make sure that they have the information they need and they're getting the proper treatment. We were able to recently create a West End TIF district, and that basically gives us opportunity to access funding for community development. In Cincinnati, there were somewhere around 22, I think, TIF districts created, but we were one of the neighborhoods that didn't have one, and we were lucky to get that put in place this past December. And maybe in a few months, we'll have some money in there that the community will be able to access some of the TIF funds. I just saw a chat pop up. So TIF stands for tax increment funding. So basically, whenever the communities are assessed for their value, we know in this neighborhood the value is going to go up. So instead of that increase, so whatever the tax was last year is a certain number. So let's say we'll just use 100. So that increase, say it increased to 150. So that 50 increase, that gets put in the TIF pot. Now, it's not all 50, because the school district taps that pot and a couple of other people have a grab at the money, but it at least puts some money in a separate pot that the community can access to do developments. And those kinds of things are to acquire property or vacant land, to try to develop it and make sure it's not blighted and things like that. But there are also a lot of controversy, because sometimes at a city level, city council and others or major developers will try to access the TIF funds without the community being aware of it. So here in Cincinnati, we are working hard to make sure that communication is established and growing and getting stronger, because we down here in the community, we need that money more than anybody to try to make a difference. So if there are any major developments or the city council that need to access that money, we are trying to put things in place to make sure that the community leaders and the community as a whole is aware. So once we go to use that money, there's actually something there. So we're grateful to create the TIF. We do have a pantry at our location, and we do food deliveries around the community. We've been a testing site for COVID-19, and we also are a part of Weston Community Council and the Business Alliance, and we support them with the websites and all kinds of different ways. We can scroll on down. So this is more community work. Again, the stadium was announced in 2018 that it would be placed in the West End. It's going to be complete in March. There was a community benefits agreement. That's what CBA stands for. And I'm sorry, I should have spelled it out. I'm bad. Sorry with the acronyms. But community benefits agreement was established, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. It wasn't all that we had hoped it would be. We needed more support, we felt, as a community, especially around the area of housing, because that was one of the major concerns whenever the community found out about the stadium coming in, and the risk of displacement and pressure and things, pressure of gentrification, and we just wanted more support. There was a single donation in terms of support to housing, and I think on my next slide I'll get into that, but we are concerned about those things listed there in terms of increased traffic, the property prices skyrocketing, gentrification concerns, but there's still space and room and opportunity for equitable development. Next slide. So I mentioned in the last slide that there was a one-time donation for housing support, and the first bullet that you see there is it. So there was $100,000 that was donated, and when you think about a historic neighborhood like the West End, we have a lot of old homes down here, and $100,000 doesn't go far. It really doesn't. So what we decided to do with that money to try to make it stretch and work, we put together a home improvement fund. And basically we had homeowners in the West End apply to some funding support. We tried to layer on different resources. So essentially, homeowners, if they were under a certain income bracket, they could access about $10,000 of the home improvement fund. And then we tried to partner with Habitat for Humanity and the Harbor Program, which is a program at the city that helps to improve exterior needs to homes, and 3 or 4 other resources we tried to stack to get a decent amount to be able to help homeowners, because on average the need that our homeowners needed was around $25,000 at the minimum to do the proper things that were needed to be done to improve their home. So last year we had 24 applicants. In 2019 we were able to help 6 applicants, and then this year we were able to help 2 more. And of course, as you all know, with COVID, this year has been straight crazy. But as soon as the weather broke for the contractors to get out there to start quoting and doing work, that's when COVID hit. Everybody took the hiatus, and then I think somewhere around June the contractors got out there and they were able to start the work on a couple of houses. So we could have been further along, but we've spent nearly $60,000 of the 100, and that was just on 8 houses, and all of their needs weren't met. We tried to do the best we can to stretch it. So we are always looking for more funding and support and grants to help replenish that fund. A second pot of fund that was not in the CBA, just let it be known, that $100,000 was it that came through the community benefits agreement in terms of housing support from FC Cincinnati. The second pot kind of happened in connection with that, but it wasn't from the team. So essentially, there was a business down near the stadium site that got purchased. They were moving to another community, and that business did not want to pay for the building they were moving into. But luckily, we got some city council support that said, hey, you cannot get that building for free. We want you to give the value of that building you're moving into to a local nonprofit in support for eviction funds. So luckily we were able to get $176,000 to use solely in the West End to help our residents combat eviction and the rental issues. So last year in 2019, we were able to help 82 families just in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is about a mile wide. It's, you know, it's not a big neighborhood, but it is densely populated. We have about 6,000 people in the West End, but we were able to help 82 families avoid eviction last year with the funds. And this year, as of September, we've been able to help 60 families. And I think that, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but that pot is down to nearly $70,000 already. So we are, just like the first pot, we're always looking for funding and grants to help combat the eviction crisis that we're under, and then also to help keep our residents in their home, the ones that are facing these exterior needs. Next slide, please. So we do have a relationship with our Port Authority. Whenever the CBA was created, the Port Authority and Seven Hills Neighborhood Houses put an MOU together. So basically it gave the community some say in port-owned properties. And we basically get to vet applications that come into the port, so we can know about what's going on in our community, who is interested, who's buying up property, and does it meet the needs of the community? Are they, you know, coming in here with a business that is going to serve the population? We want to make sure that development is done equitably and there's opportunity for everyone. So the partnership with the port has been good. I don't want to lie and say it's been perfect, because it hasn't, but it's there, and we try to utilize the power that they have, the tools that they have in the favor of the community. There's an image there. Those are the Bay Miller row houses. Those are 8 houses that were stabilized from city funding. About $500,000 went into stabilizing those properties. And at first, the port just wanted them all to go to market. And we had some pushback, and we said, hey, can we please have some levels of affordability to this development? We don't want our very first opportunity right out the gate with you guys to just be completely market. Let's go about what we said we were going to do. So luckily, 2 of those homes are going to be Habitat homes. 1 is going to be owned by us, and we're excited about having those opportunities carved out. And it wasn't easy, but we had to keep pushing. And I know you all know about that with us all being from CDCs. And again, we're vetting applications. We're trying to stay in the know, on top of things, so we know what's going on in this community, and to make sure the voices of the residents are heard, all the voices of the residents.
Yeah, we have a quick question. How did you get them to agree to partner with you?
Well, you mean I guess you mean the MOU right from the beginning. It kind of happened with the stadium. So whenever the stadium was announced and we started our community benefits agreement discussion, unfortunately, the city of Cincinnati was not at the table. We thought that they would be one of the signers on the CBA. But essentially, they took a step back, and it was FC Cincinnati, the Port Authority, and West End Community Council. West End Community Council does not have resources or money or funding or anything. We didn't have money for a lawyer. It was so 2018, 2019, I don't know. It was those years, I don't want to go back, because it was something else trying to deal with this situation. So the first lawyer we got was paid for and FC Cincinnati picked a lawyer. Of course, you know how that went, not good. Luckily, we were able to then select our own lawyer. And I'm speaking from West End Community Council perspective right now, because the CDC was not a part of the community benefits agreement. Again, I will state it was FC Cincinnati, the Port Authority, and West End Community Council. The CDC was not a part of the community benefits agreement. And so once that community benefits agreement went through the process, was approved, and moved forward. The Port Authority then had the memorandum of understanding with us as the CDC of the West End. So it was kind of, they had to acknowledge us. They had to address us. There wasn't any way that the port was going to have all the property that they have in the community and own the stadium essentially, and not be in relationship with the CDC of the West End. So I would have to chalk that up to a lot of support at a council level to make sure that people are doing what they need to do and properly acknowledging the entities in the community that they have to work with, even if they don't like it, even if we don't agree all the time. It's okay. We have to work together, and there's a way for us to find some balance. So I hope that answers the question that was there. It was not easy, but it's like they had to. We weren't a part of the CBA, and I think they liked that we weren't a part of the CBA, but the port had to acknowledge us, and we are working that partnership until the cows come home. Okay, we are going to try to ride them and do whatever we can to set things aside and have things done proactively for the community, because the last thing we want to see, and I'm jumping ahead, the last thing we want to see is a year or two from now, the stadium's going to be done in March. A year or two from now, we look back and like, oh, what happened? I don't want to hear that. We are trying. We still have time to make a difference. We still have a ton of vacancy in this neighborhood in terms of vacant houses and vacant land. We have opportunity to be intentional and set things aside for equitable development. We need market. Don't get me wrong. I think maybe the next slide is going to show that we need market rate, but we also have a population that is at risk. So y'all, after the CBA, then we went through the discussions with the Port Authority. After the CBA, we went through the discussions with the Port Authority for the MOU. The next thing that was funded was a housing study. And it's not that I don't value housing studies. They're great. They tell you a lot of information. And this one basically told us some stuff that we were already had some inklings about. You know, we knew that there would be a large portion of our community that was at some risk of displacement, and this helped us put an exact number to that. So it took 1.5 years to go through the housing study. FC Cincinnati paid for the housing study. And basically this is the slide that I try to share as much as I can within and outside of our community. So 44% of our residents are at some risk of displacement. Now this was back in September of 2019. And that goes from individuals who are making 18,000 all the way up to 50,000. That's a large grouping of people, but there is some level of displacement risk. And at the bottom, hopefully you can see that, of course, 56% of the residents in the West End are not threatened as of right now because they make more than $50,150 $1 a year, or they're in some kind of protected subsidized housing. But even that grouping that is in the protected housing, those protections expire. So we need to make sure that those housing protections are renewed, so those affordable apartments can remain there, because that 44% could be higher if those affordability levels expire. So again, we have nearly half of our residents are at some level of displacement. So that's why we're trying so hard to stand with the community, all of the members of the community, even the 56% who aren't at some risk of displacement, because again, we need market rate development in this community. There are families who have been down here for decades and their houses are finally getting some value. some of them are actually selling their house at a decent amount and they're able to move on if that's what they so choose to do. We want to make sure that they are getting a fair amount. And then also for the people in the protected units, we want to make sure that what we have as protected can remain, because there is enough vacancy to bring market in. And also there's still vacancy to have affordable home ownership opportunities. All the houses in the West End don't have to start at $200,000 and up. We can find subsidy within the city and others to try to bring down those housing costs, but keeping the value up. So we can just have those affordable homeownership opportunities. So I don't know where I am at on time, but I'll go to the next slide because I don't want to ramble too much. And I'm almost done. Yes.
Just with time, I just want to let you know, we are running over a little bit. No big deal. I think everybody in the chat is really appreciating what we're going over. So I'm going to adjust our plan just a little bit. We're going to cut out the stretch reflection break and we're going to shorten up the breakout groups a little bit. If we can wrap up in the next 5 to 7 minutes, we will shift to the next thing and it will be great. The information you're giving is super valuable.
Okay, I thought I'd be a lot quicker, y'all. So, okay, so I want to go to the next slide and let me know. I hope I'm not missing any comments in the chat. So again, some of the recommendations that came out of the housing study. I'm not against housing studies. It was great. It gave us a lot of recommendations, but there was no money to do anything. These recommendations are awesome, but it's just been really, really difficult. And we have this stadium that's going to be done in March. Time is of the essence. And so we were able to create the TIF. Great. That was rough, but it got done. We would love to have some funding to help us have a housing report card. You know, a year ago, this housing study was done. They drove around the neighborhood. They surveyed every parcel in the community, whether it was vacant or occupied or what condition it was in. And we want to be able to keep score of that. And it's been hard because we haven't had the funding to do a yearly or a 6-month update on that information. We are always continuing to work that Seven Hills is recognized as the lead CDC of the West End, because there are so many times that development comes in the community and they don't acknowledge us, but our relationship with the port, our relationship at the city level, more and more developers are coming into the community and reaching out and acknowledging us. And I would be lying if I say they weren't. It's getting better and better, but it's not been without a bunch of pushing to make sure we are acknowledged and we are heard. We're always trying to develop the partnerships, look for funding that's ongoing. We're encouraging investment in the areas of opportunity. We're always trying to protect our residents and to stabilize the housing stock. But again, the housing study was awesome, but there was no money attached to it. We need money for capacity at our organization. We need money to buy properties and stabilize them. It was just hard because it was just study after study, recommendation after recommendation, and just no money to do anything with. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, y'all. I know it, but I feel like in this neighborhood, so much has happened to it, and the stadium's nearly done. We're looking forward to the future. We're looking forward to businesses coming into the West End. We're looking forward to development happening, but we don't want to look back a year from now and say, man, where are the Johnsons? Where's Miss Fanny? You know, what happened? You know, we want to make sure that the people who have called this community home for so many years continue to do so. Yeah, 10 or 20 years from now also. So the next slide, I just wanted to quickly show you some of the projects that we're trying to work on. So 1805 Bay Miller, it's one of the Bay Miller row houses that I talked about earlier. It's one that we were able to at least stake claim in, and we are actively looking for partners to help us get the funding in place to renovate that to make a home ownership opportunity. The next slide is 1809 Freeman, beautiful building. We already own that. we don't own much, but we own that, and we luckily got a little bit of funding from the city to stabilize the building and move forward with some first floor renovations, because that's going to be part of our staff offices. But it's not, we don't have all the money. We need to fully work it out. And then the next slide is the Regal Theater. Is anybody from the West End? Is anybody from Cincinnati? Does anybody have ties to the West End? The Regal Theater is a historic structure, a beautiful theater that we are hoping can be saved and have community ownership and have be an African-American arts hub, and tons of partners are needed to make this happen. And it's owned by the port, which is a good thing, because it's not just owned by whomever that we don't have any relationship with. It is owned by the port, but we're holding the port accountable to being patient with the community. We need to come together and find the right partners and the right funding. We don't want them to get too antsy or too impatient and then just go with the first major development that pops up just to get it done. It's like, no, we have this partnership, work with the community, and just constantly trying to remind them of that. Looking ahead, we are going to be updating our West End Speak community plan, because in 2016, ain't nobody planned for a stadium. So we have a lot of areas to update. So we are working through that. We are actively applying to NOFA funds. That's funding at a city level that gives us gap funding to help us put some affordable rental and home ownership opportunities in the community. Our neighborhood has very, very wide, busy streets. We are actively going through a Lynn Street safety project because there are so many accidents. And this past summer, one of our lifelong West End residents was struck and killed by a vehicle, and it's just tragic. So we're always trying to do that, because when this community was created, it had these huge, long, wide roads that is just so unsafe for our seniors and families and children to be crossing. We're fundraising, we're writing grants, we're advocating, we're trying to get a tax freeze in place. And for our low-income homeowners, we know their values are going up. We know their taxes are going to go up. We need philanthropic partners to put a pot together with us. So whenever their taxes go up, that increase, those fixed income homeowners have access to that, so they don't feel pressure and feel kicked out of their homes. This isn't new stuff. We're trying to see what's going on in other cities and communities to try to make it happen here. We're trying to develop price appropriate single family homes and apartments, working to get the Regal back online, and also putting together financial literacy coaching and assisting residents into home ownership. And another thing with our home improvement fund right now, yes, I'll answer that question in a second. And maybe Emily, you got in a little bit late. So another thing with our home improvement fund, again, the hope was to get a whole lot more money into the home improvement fund, $2, $3, maybe even $4 or $5 million, so we can say to somebody, hey, you have this 4-unit apartment building. Here's $25,000 grant for you to help get you to where you need to be to renovate the building. You do not have to pay that money back, and you agree to keep your rental rates at some level of affordability for the next 10 or 15 years. Something. We want that home improvement fund to be able to be larger, to be able to use for more creative things and ideas, because we know that Jimmy down the street, when he buys a building and renovates it, he has to make the rental rates at a certain level, so he can, have return on his investment. We get that, but we're hoping that we can have funding as a community to be able to assist in these developments to keep them at a more affordable level. And then Emily, you mentioned something about land trust. Earlier at the beginning of the conversation, I stated that we do have the community land co-op under our umbrella, which was a land trust created back in the 80s. It's one of the oldest urban community land trusts. In the 90s, it had nearly 30 properties on its inventory list. And over the years, those houses were paid off or they were sold to keep that organization running. But in 2017, we acquired the community land co-op under our umbrella, and we currently hold the mortgage to 5 homes, and we own and manage 2 duplexes, and we are always actively looking for housing donations. We're trying to get a house right now donated it from within the community because a family member received the house after their aunt passed away. It's been hard for them to maintain, but they just don't want to sell it. They just don't want to sell it to whomever. They want to see it come into community ownership and be an affordable home ownership opportunity for someone. So we are doing the community land trust model also. So again, I am no expert down here. We are just doing our best to try to combat the gentrification and the risks of displacement that we are facing. And I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. And I think the next thing we're going to do, if there aren't any lingering questions in the chat, the next thing we're going to do is go in. Oh, I think it's break time, right?
Actually, Tia, since we ran over a little bit on the presentation, which again, this is great information. I think everybody really valued that. And I think it's way more important than a stretch break.
Okay.
We're going to cut the stretch break out. We are going to go into questions for about 5 to 6 minutes, and then we will reconvene and keep moving. If that's okay,
wonderful. So you guys are going to be split up into your breakout groups, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes for the wrap up. Welcome back, everyone. I think everyone's back, hopefully. Does anybody want to take a second or two to unmute and maybe share a little bit about their little breakout discussion? I know it was, Joy, I'm sorry it's too short. I know it wasn't a lot of time in the breakout, but does anybody have anything they want to share? Silence. Okay, no biggie. I get it. I know. Oh yeah, go ahead, Joy. Oh, can you? Oh, let me unmute. Can I unmute you? There you go.
Did it work? Okay, it said the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves.
There you go.
Mutiny, no. So we were just starting to talk about tools to protect property taxes.
Okay.
And the value. So while we recognize that there is a benefit to increase property values, how do we protect folks so that it doesn't go up drastically? So Emily was saying in Yellow Springs, they just got tax bills and some of them are increasing by 25 to 50%.
Wow.
So that's very drastic. And Kim talked about in Columbus, there's streets with a $50,000 house and a $450,000 house. And so I shared with the group, and we were just getting into it, that the city of Cleveland is conducting a study on how to, just looking at their property tax abatement program and how that could potentially be a tool to prevent, displacement because folks can't afford their properties. And we were saying that it's also a statewide issue. So that's where we left off. And maybe this is something that the Ohio CDC Association could pick up.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, the tax abatement program, it's great and all, but it seems like the abatement is always given to people who could afford to pay, So thank you for sharing all those points. And again, this session is being recorded. So I know the Ohio CDC is online and they're listening, and that's definitely something that we as CDCs need more support around, because I know I don't have the answers to that, but I know we could definitely benefit from those kinds of policy changes. I see 2 hands. Ms. Sanford?
Yeah. So someone in my group actually said that gentrification really creates new barriers to access in communities. And I'd never really thought about it that way. I've always thought about the displacement that happens, but before the displacement, really creating barriers, taking away those maybe small businesses that had occurred or existed for so long in the community, and then new businesses come in and they're not hiring people from the community. So I just thought that was a really interesting way to think about it, because I think a lot of the times we think about the before and after when it comes to gentrification, and not really what goes on in that space, in that during that time.
Yes. Thank you for saying that too. I know I do get kind of one track mind thinking about the housing, but then also the support that our businesses need that are already there, that's been in business for a long time and needs continued support to be able to stay in business, to be able to survive as the neighborhood changes. So yes, that's a huge, huge point. Thank you for sharing. And I think Kim had her hand up. If you still have something to share, if Kim, did you have something? Kim
That's
Knight.
what Joy was saying. The homestead law is statewide, and that's something that I've been trying to reach out to some legislators. So maybe that's something Ohio CDC can look at. They did expand it, so it does include veterans and seniors or disabled if they're not quite seniors, and it would be great if it could include income based. If it could be income based as well.
Yes. I totally agree with that comment also. So I think that's all the comments that we can take right now. We're very close to the end, everyone. And before we finish up, I just want to thank everyone for attending, being on the session. We really appreciate you all attending. We hope that you stick around for more of the conference. Coming up later today is the Pandemic, Public Health, and Opportunities discussion. You can get more information on all of the sessions at resilientcommunitiesforum.org/my schedule. Hopefully the link will be in the chat there from the tech team. And there will be a survey going out on Friday. We're hoping everyone will complete that. We need to give that feedback. And lastly, I've been asked to share an inspirational thought or idea. So I just wanted to say to everyone in closing, we're in this culture of canceling people with quickness. And I just want to encourage everyone to try not to cancel so quickly. We have a lot of different individuals in our communities. We have a lot of different point of views and perspectives. And I think all of us in some way can identify with feeling like we've been canceled. And just for us to remember as individuals to just be a little gracious and try to not cancel each other so quickly. That's my little tidbit. So I hope you guys have a good day. We're 2 minutes under, so maybe you can take a stretch now before you go on to your next session. Thank you, Ohio CDC. I appreciate you guys. I hope you had a good time.